Your God died. This is one of the biggest objections to Christianity given by Muslims today, and the logic sort of makes sense. It's a huge dilemma for Christianity, right? Many of the faith don't know how to answer this objection, and it traps the Christian into an impossible situation where the religion can allegedly be proven false. What's the truth then? According to Christian doctrine, when Jesus was crucified, did God actually die? Yes, he did. But probably not in the way that you're thinking, so make sure you stick around to the end of the video to see exactly what I mean by that. In this video, I'm going to go through a couple of really important things. Firstly, I'm going to show you the problems that this question poses for Christianity and the trap it causes Christians to fall into. Then, I'm going to present you with early church doctrine which gives a sound answer to this very issue with the true Christian belief. And finally, I'll show you an interesting parallel in Islam using Islamic standards so that the honest Muslim cannot possibly continue to use this topic as an objection. And maybe, just maybe, it will help you understand the perfect sacrifice of Jesus, the Son of Allah the Father. Did God die on the cross? Why then is this such a problematic question for the Christians, and why is it so commonly used by Muslims to attempt to refute Christianity? Well, simple. The question traps us and leaves us in an impossible position, right? Firstly, some may answer and state that God did not die, and that it was just the human nature of Jesus that died. Here are a few problems with that though. If we say that God did not die, and it was simply the human nature of Jesus that did, then you're separating the divine nature of Christ from the human nature, stating that it was not part of the sacrifice made. This then means that the sacrifice is not one of God, it's one merely of a human, and the price of a human's life is not of any value at all to free all from sin and death, nor to satisfy the payment of sin. The sacrifice then becomes pointless. The Bible, including Jesus, confirms this too. Mark 10 reads, "Then who can be saved? Jesus looked at them and said, 'With man it is impossible, but not with God.'" Psalm 49 also backs this up and says, "Truly no man can ransom another or give to God the price of his life, for the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice." This stance is also heretical. In the 5th century, the unified church condemned a heresy called Nestorianism. This is the belief that Jesus existed as two distinct persons in one human body, and that there was some sort of disunity between the human and divine natures of Christ. To state that it was only Jesus' human nature which died on the cross is to state that his two natures are not unified in the one divine person. It creates a separation between his two natures. Thus, if they're not unified in experience and subsistence, it must be said that the two natures are separate personhoods too. You have one Jesus who is human and another Jesus who is God, both in the same body. It goes against the hypostatic union nature of Christ set out by the church at the Council of Chalcedon. I'll go deeper into this in a minute. To say that Christ has two natures which are not unified in the one person though, means that you must concede to him having two personhoods. This is straight up damnable heresy and condemned by the church. But now that we know that this answer has its problems, it only leaves us with one more option to this question. God did die. Jesus, being the eternally begotten Son of the Father, is God. Jesus died on the cross, therefore God died. But here comes the problem with that too. God cannot die. He is eternal and never ceases to exist. This therefore proves that Jesus is not God because he, in fact, died. Christianity therefore is false, so Muslims win, let's just all convert to Islam, right? Nah boy, hold up though, because early Christianity, church fathers and the church herself well before the lifetime of Muhammad soundly dealt with this very issue. This isn't actually really any sort of dilemma for Christians at all. There is a suitable doctrinal way to explain all of this. If, after I unpack it all, the Muslim still sees this as some sort of issue for Christians and a way to disprove Christianity, then you must concede that Islam has the very same issue, and I'll show you exactly why at the end of this video. Remember, I've already told you that it is true Christian doctrine to state that God did in fact die on the cross. But how then does this work in light of what I've just said? Surely, I've just proven that this can't be the case though, right? Well, like I said, there is a way around this and a reasonable biblical explanation as to why and how God died. Firstly, I need to define a couple of things though, boy. What does the word death in the context of this conversation actually mean? Well, death is the human condition of separation. It's where the soul separates from the body and therefore the human person ceases to exist. But remember, that's the key here. Death is a condition. It's a condition brought into the world as a consequence of sin. Also, let's define the term hypostatic union too. The hypostatic union is where Jesus has two natures, fully God and fully human, united in the one divine person. It means that the human and divine natures are always united in the single personhood of Christ. They're never separated from one another. So everything experienced in the two natures of Christ must be said to be experienced by the one divine person. The church laid out at the Council of Chalcedon the following: Christ is perfect in Godhead, and also perfect in manhood, truly God and truly man, consubstantial with the Father and consubstantial with us. Essentially, this means that if the human nature of Jesus experiences something, the whole divine person experiences that same thing too. The same can be said for the divine nature as well. This was the term used to combat the heresy of Nestorianism, which I've already spoken about. So, are Muslims right? If we say that God died, are we admitting that Jesus is not divine and the true Son of God the Father? No, they're not right at all. Let me explain how using proper Christian doctrine. Jesus Christ is the Word of God who pre-existed flesh in his incarnation. John chapter 1 says this, where the Word was with God, the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. His eternal source is in the Father. And being that he's eternally generated from God, he has a distinction in personhood, and therefore is the second person of the Holy Trinity. This also means that he, being the eternally begotten Son of God, is in nature and essence God. The whole person of Jesus must be said to be God. He's not half human and half divine. He's fully divine and fully human, united as one divine person. We know from the Bible accounts of Jesus' life and historical evidence that Jesus was crucified and died on the cross. Yes, many Muslims like to say that this isn't the case because Muhammad asserted something different 600 years later, but there's literally just as much evidence supporting his claims as there are that pigs can fly. Anyway, with Jesus being crucified, we can safely state that he therefore died. Jesus, the distinct divine person, is the very one who was crucified. Thus, the second distinct person of the Godhead was the one who experienced the human condition of death. Now listen carefully to this next part. A single, distinct human person ceases to exist when they die, even though it can be said that the soul still remains. However, a single divine person does not cease to exist under the same stipulations under the laws of creation. Jesus, who is God, took on flesh and died, but the divine person of Christ did not cease to exist. He experienced the fullness of the human condition of death, but being much more than a human, was never corrupted by it, nor did he stop existing as the second person of the Godhead. That part's important, particularly for the Muslims to hear, and I'll show you why towards the end of the video. I'll say it again though. The Word of God experienced the destructive human condition of death, yet was never corrupted by it himself, nor did he cease to exist. The two natures of the single divine person of Christ never changed. During Christ's period in the tomb, his divine person continued to assume both his body and soul, although they were separated from each other by death. Being in hypostatic union, it must be said then, that if the human nature of Jesus experienced something, then the whole of his divine personhood experienced that same thing too. So to conclude, the distinct person, the eternal Son, the Word of God, who took on humanity, experienced the ultimate consequence of humanity's sin, which is death, whilst never being corrupted by it, nor ceasing to exist because of it. Jesus, who is God, died. Muslims, you may say this is stupid. You may not be able to comprehend how, in fact, one of divine nature can experience the consequence of human destruction, yet never cease to exist, nor be corrupted by it. However, by using Islamic standards, this is something that you must be able to understand. If you can't, then maybe you're not a Muslim after all. Again, Christians believe that the eternal Word of God is a person, Jesus. Muslims believe that the Quran and 7 modes of Arabic recitation allegedly revealed to Muhammad are the eternal word of Allah. Now, imagine every person in the world who have recited it ceased to exist. Well, that's fine because it's contained in the physical copies of the Quran, right? Now, imagine that every single physical copy was burned and destroyed. Every book, every fragment, every manuscript. Oof, man. All 30 plus versions of the Quran would then be no more, right? So, due to the Quran suffering the consequence of human destruction, does that now mean that the word of Allah ceases to exist also? Your answer would be no, because you believe it has existed in essence with Allah for eternity. In a similar way, Just because the distinct divine person who is the Word of God, Jesus Christ, suffered the consequence of human sin and destruction, it doesn't mean to say that he ceases to exist. It is the Christian belief that the distinct divine person of the Son is one with and the same essence and nature as the Father eternally. So did God die? Yes, God the Son died on the cross and resurrected again 3 days later. This now leaves one more big question. Why was Jesus, the apparent Word of God, sacrificed? I'll leave a link to the video up here.